Enemy mech destroyed. Primary objective successful. Proceed to dust-off zone for extraction. Sensors indicate friendly dropship has entered atmosphere. ETA dropship 1 minute. Shutdown sequence initiated.
The views and opinions expressed on the show are those of the guests or hosts, and not necessarily those of the advertisers, networks, platforms, or stations. Warning that the content of the show may not be suitable for all audiences, and that viewer discretion is advised. The show does not intend to provide medical, legal, or financial advice, and viewers or listeners should consult with a professional before making any decisions based on the information.
Welcome back, everybody, to Paranormal Intelligence Agency Radio Live. We are broadcasting from 300 feet down in an abandoned nuclear missile silo somewhere lost deep in the post-apocalyptic wastelands of the Dakota Territories. And high above us, just today, there are thousands of nesting giant radioactive arachnids, and they are casting webs hither and thither like Spider-Man on ayahuasca. I am joined as always, by the paranormal crime fighting duo. Daisy and the Sundance Kid are working security in the silo tonight. Sonny, come here, buddy. Come here. Come here. Come here. I wanted to show everybody security. Oh, come here, Daisy. All right, come here. This is what security looks like for real, guys, on the Great Space Roller Coaster. So this is Daisy. She's actually got the shotgun, and she's watching the doors for the radioactive arachnids this evening. But this has been a crazy week. This week I had to get a lot of work done for changing out my display that's at the East Bank Art Gallery in downtown Sioux Falls, South Dakota, for anybody that's in that vicinity of the neighborhood. So I'm an artist for most of my time now, and I've been busy preparing a bunch of paintings, 9 of them over the past few weeks, so that I could have a complete change up for the first Friday art walk, which all the art galleries do. So that is sponsoring the show tonight. Since we don't really have a sponsor, it's being sponsored by jackcareyart.com. So come by and take a look at some of my paintings. I do sell the originals right on my website. And you can also browse our store. I got a Redbubble store with 40 plus products that you can buy that have the images of my paintings on them. Even like shower curtains and duvet covers and things like that. So if you feel like supporting the show, come by to jackcareyart.com and see me. You can also follow me on TikTok, which is, I've been exploring TikTok. It's really a very interesting and effective algorithm. Far superior, I would say, to YouTube or Facebook. And I predict that those two platforms have a major, maybe even terminal problem on their hands at this stage. Let's face it, YouTube, for my YouTubers out there this week, again, the YouTube algorithm has never been kind to me or my show. We have been shadow banned over and over again. The algorithm does not include us in searches. It's been really difficult swimming against that stream for so many years. That's why there's only 7,000 subscribers on the YouTube channel and many thousands of people out there that actually listen to the live show and to the archive shows and things like that. But you can join me at Jack Carey 6 on TikTok, and you can follow both my paranormal TikTok videos that I put out, as well as the new paintings that I do. Kind of film those as I go along and do progression videos and things like that. It's sort of the weird dichotomy of my life that I'm a professional artist as well as a 30-year investigator into all things paranormal. So, but tonight's an exciting night. We're going to be discussing a couple of different topics. I chose these two topics because they're topics that people tend to forget about, and topics that I've done pretty extensive, deep investigations into over the years. I have produced very explicit, deep, well-researched YouTube videos regarding these two subjects, and those can be found on my YouTube channel, which is just under Jack Cary, C-A-R-Y. And tonight we're going to be talking about two major human efforts that have been lost to us and to the public. One of those is a lost city in the Grand Canyon. That's right. There is an actual lost city in the Grand Canyon. Most people are unaware of that fact, but it's something that I've investigated thoroughly. And my old partner, J.C. Johnson, before he passed away, was actually part of an expedition to the Grand Canyon involving many famous researchers at the time, including David Hatcher Childress of Ancient Alien fame. But David Childress was one of J.C. Johnson's best friends, and had invited him along on this very interesting insider expedition. So I kind of have an insider view of what occurred on that expedition. And, you know, the city's there. It's very interesting. Now, it's not visible until you walk into the giant corridor through a doorway that's down a sheer rock cliff, thousands of feet. But it's there, and it's something that presents a huge historical mystery, and we're going to be talking about that tonight. And we're going to be talking about a very interesting line of evidence that leads us down a dark rabbit hole of what appears to be a lost, or perhaps not, operational colony on Mars. And by that I mean an actual colony that is there right now, operating with humans inside of it. And there is a very interesting line of evidence to show that, in fact, a body of, well, let's just call them the Illuminati, shall we? The people that really control the purse strings around the world have been able to siphon off enough money from the American economy, 23 trillion, according to one estimate from the General Accounting Office, which was talked about years ago, that they were able to use basically to get colonists to Mars to inhabit already pre-existing alien structures. And I have to add, there's photographic evidence for this, discovered by Dr. Courtney Brown, who heads up a premier remote viewing group today. But what's interesting is Dr. Brown actually discovered this photograph in NASA's archive. And it appears to be a photograph of the actual dome that these colonists are living in. So that is some good stuff. And you'll have to excuse me when I wet my whistle, because I've had a dry throat all week. It's been crazy. I've been, I guess, talking too much and not listening enough, perhaps. But, paranormal in the news, and I was going to talk about Cryptid Corner this evening. It's almost impossible to see if I can share something. Screen window or tab. Well, I'll have to share it next week, but something strange happened to me this week, and it's part of Cryptid Corner, and that is basically our Cryptid Corner this week because things have been a little quiet. We're going to talk about Expedition Bigfoot and Cryptid Corner tonight because something strange going on that show. And but anyway, this week I was approached on social media by one of my friends that brought it to my attention that someone had nabbed one of my Bigfoot photographs that was from the old days at Crypto Four Corners that I have on my Facebook profile. And they, basically stole the photograph, however they did it, and then presented that on various Facebook Bigfoot groups, not realizing that that's a known photograph that I copyrighted in 2015. Right. And so this hoaxer, poster, whoever they were, tried to perpetrate it like they had taken the photograph, and that forced me to confront the issue. And one of the people on one of the moderators or admins on this Facebook Bigfoot page asked me about the true story, which I relayed to them, which is interesting because it resulted in probably the best, closest still shot representation of what a real Sasquatch looks like in the face. And it's not what anybody thinks. When you see it, it is quite interesting. So the face has a protruding brow ridge and deep set eyes, and from about here down it looks human. From just under the nose down, that looks human. From the nose up, that looks primate, or it looks prehistoric Neanderthal / primate with a cone-shaped head and stuff. It's clear that was a Sasquatch. And what's interesting is that the photo, or these 4 images that I have, actually came from 4 frames. 4 frames out of a 30-minute tutorial hiking video done by a gentleman that was a professional hiker. He had a business that actually produced tutorial hiking videos back in the day when they had like VHS tapes and all that kind of stuff, right? And so he would travel around the world and go to like famous hiking trails and stuff like that, and he'd hike the trail and film the hike so that other tourists could watch these hiking videos. You could buy these videos like, I'm going to this famous trail in Europe somewhere, and yada yada, and here's a video of what the trail is, and you could watch the whole video. It was actually a cool business and a cool idea for a business that he had. But on one hike, it was the High Fall Trails in North Carolina. He noticed some movement off to his left, but it was brief and fleeting, and he didn't really get a very good glimpse of it, but he thought the camera may have. And, he slowed it down at his house. He finally came across what it is he saw, and it really freaked him out. So he approached us over at Crypto Four Corners and asked our opinion about it. And I was able to take the video, and JC tasked me with the tedious job of going through a 30-minute video frame by frame by frame till I found the creature. It appeared in 4 frames. The gentleman never really saw anything other than some slight movement, and then when he got home, he slowed it down and saw the same thing, and he was like, oh my God, But when we confirmed that what this guy was seeing to him, that this was a Sasquatch, there's no doubt about it, it really freaked the guy out. Like, it really freaked him out. He thought he was going to lose his reputation and the business he had created. And, oh my God, people are thinking that he's hoaxing this to get more video sold and that kind of thing. The guy erased the video. He totally erased it. He was too freaked out and didn't want his name known or published, so we didn't publish anything. And that photograph, to this day, in my professional investigative opinion, after seeing 30 years of evidence, is the best still photograph of a Sasquatch ever captured. And the guy didn't even know that he had captured it at the time. So that's the weird reality matrix that we live in. But, Expedition Bigfoot, Cryptid Corner, right? What can we say, guys? They've been running marathons of it, first of all, on the Travel Channel or History Channel, whatever, wherever they're airing that. And they are obviously a CIA-funded operation. I say that for various reasons. The number one reason is the just inexplicable amount of funding that this group has, and the sheer amount of advanced, ultra advanced, state-of-the-art, cutting-edge technology that they have access to, which requires deep, deep pockets. I was already suspicious when they flashed under the name of their field investigator, not Russell Accord, but the gentleman that goes out and actually interviews eyewitnesses. They show his name, and right underneath it says former CIA operative, right on it. Right? And it's clear that Bryce, the guy that heads up the group, that guy is a CIA control officer. He has CIA almost tattooed across his forehead. And then they whip out, and you can look it up. Go ahead and look, pull up Amazon and look up EMF shielded tent. And look up the same model that they used for one scene in one episode. Cost $37,000. I'm sure it comes with a free delivery if you have a Prime membership. Amazon needs to sponsor my show. But that kind of funding in cryptozoology does not exist. Period. It never has, and it never will. Because nobody is going to pay you to try to solve a problem that nobody wants to solve. And that's really tonight's main topic in Cryptid Corner, is that Bigfoot is a problem no one wants to solve. Yes, there are an army of field investigators that go out weekend after weekend, dedicated. I was one of them for many decades, and still from time to time I pick and choose my battles these days because I know exactly what to look for and where to go. But there's an army of people that go out every single weekend looking for Bigfoot, looking for that undeniable, indisputable evidence that will finally convince an unwilling public that, in fact, there is a multi-thousand member apex predator species, bipedal, 9-10 feet tall, weighing 1,000 pounds, breeding, living, and thriving in the hundreds of millions of heavily wooded, forested acreage of North America. Right? And they go out every single weekend and they try the exact same techniques time and time and time again with little to no result. Time and time and time again. And Einstein, even though he was wrong about his physics, and we know that because of the UAPs flying around or exhibiting that they can go by laws of physics, which is unknown to us today. But even so, was a pretty smart guy. And he said that, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over again and expecting a different result. So, the whole effort by the Bigfoot community out there at retrieving evidence from the field has to be completely revamped and has to be gone about in a completely new and different way and direction, right? I think the real question for us in paranormal land and with Bigfoot research in general is, why is the CIA so interested in Bigfoot disclosure all of a sudden? Because what they just showed this past season was a Bigfoot that they caught using LiDAR down in a cave system, and at the same time they had a camera in that cave system, and that camera was positioned exactly where the LiDAR showed a body of a Bigfoot should be, and the camera only picked up what looked to be cloaked movement. That's right. You have to check it out. They have caught evidence of a cloaked Bigfoot down in a cave. It's pretty indisputable. I mean, when you see their evidence, the LiDAR cannot be faked, nor would I think the CIA has any interest in faking anything. I think they are all in at this stage. The real question is, why are they all in? And does it have anything to do with UAP disclosure at all? I would remind everyone about the disappearing track line problem of the Bigfoot phenomenon, and the fact that disappearing track lines are discovered repeatedly, and it looks like these things, you'll find a trail of prints. They'll be 16 to 19 inches long. They are perfect. They go across fields like the one we discovered in the Chusca Mountains for hundreds of yards. The topography doesn't change, and yet the footprints just stop in midstream. Sort of the same problem they're having with various wolf-like cryptids on Skinwalker Ranch, but this happens in the Bigfoot phenomenon all the time, and it's like the creature just vanishes into thin air, and then you have the indigenous people around the country and into Canada and elsewhere who claim that these are creatures that walk between worlds, as they say, that have magical abilities, as they would describe them. And after witnessing the evidence that they have collected on Expedition Bigfoot of a cloaked Bigfoot clearly captured on LiDAR hiding in a cave system, and the Native Americans told us on numerous occasions that these creatures live underground. It's confirmation of two major things in cryptozoology world, which I don't think are being fully acknowledged right now. And number one, it's confirmation that the creatures can cloak themselves. How big is that? That's huge. That should be page one of every cryptozoology conversation taking place right now online. Proof they can cloak. That should alter the way that evidence is trying to be obtained in the field right now forever. Number two, they're using the cave systems. That should alter forever the way that evidence is trying to be obtained right now. How many out there actually who are members of the Bigfoot Army that go out every single weekend are actually going to alter their behavior and their field techniques to acknowledge these new findings and to evolve into something that's smarter than the phenomenon itself, because that's what we need to do as cryptozoologists. And tonight, when we come back from our break, we're going to be talking about a lost city in the Grand Canyon. What did they have in that city? Who built it? And what other secrets are kind of hidden around this lost city? That leads us down one major rabbit hole and possibly all the way back to ancient Egypt. And if we have enough time, and I'm hoping that we do, we're going to explore another chain or train of evidence that kind of leads us down a neighboring rabbit hole of a lost colony on Mars, and that has an equally compelling line of evidence. So stick with us, and we'll be back right after this.
I'm Sarah, and this is my story.
I'm Ellen, and this is my story.
One night, I was at a bar. I was having fun with my friends.
I
had one too many drinks.
I
got behind the wheel to go home.
I got a cab to go home.
All of a sudden, from out of nowhere, a squirrel ran across the road.
It
happened so quickly, I barely had time to react.
The cabbie barely had time to react.
I swerved.
The cab swerved.
I can't believe it. I hit a guy.
I cannot believe it. The cabbie just missed a guy.
I wish I took a cab.
Thank goodness I took a cab.
You have the choice to save a life. Don't drive buzzed. It's a decision you'll never regret. Buzzed driving is drunk driving. Brought to you by the Department of Transportation and the Ad Council.
Shadows creep, monsters leave. In the woods, strange voices. Shadows creep in the woods, monsters leave. In the woods, bright noises. Mystic call. Airway mystic call. Mystic call. UFO. Alien overlord. From ancient times to modern days, legends of creatures in sudden disarray. Hear them speak through frequencies. Alien connections. Tune it in, break it out, truth untold. Tune it in, cosmic mystery. Dark woods where legends breathe. Paranormal whispers, can you believe? Bigfoot strikes through the veils. Dogman howls in the midnight tale. From the static, revelations pour. Portals open, dimensions roar. the starlit skies, echoes of the truth, no disguise. Cryptid shadows creeping near, through the static, voices clear. Dark woods where legends breathe, paranormal whispers, can you believe? It's the Paranormal Intelligence Agency Radio. Whoa. Wednesday nights, enjoy the show. It's how we spend our Wednesday nights. Yay, it's crank that dial and dim the show. It's how we spend our Wednesday.
Welcome back, everybody, to Paranormal Intelligence Agency Radio Live. I'm your host, Jack Carey, your personal guide to the Twilight Zone and the Sinister Minister. We're talking about tonight lost colonies. We're talking about lost cities, and we were talking about Bigfoot being cloaked and lost in a cave system. So anyway, to finish up Cryptid Corner, it's very interesting that the CIA appears to be involved, and the whole operation has CIA written all over it. It operates like a CIA operation. They got a control officer, that's Bryce, back at the control center. They got a field operative, that's Russell. He's the guy on the ground actually tracking the creatures. They're using a AI-driven algorithm to tell them when and where to be to run into these creatures that has all of the migrational pattern like information in it. They have apparently non-stop funding, which allows them to do stuff like hire a guy that has 6 LiDAR drones with heat-seeking capability and stuff like that. Nobody can compete with that. That kind of stuff is the stuff of cryptozoologic dreams. We used to dream and talk about that kind of stuff, and around campfires with, Bigfoots howling around us and things like that, Oh man, boy, if we had a thermal drone, what we could do. And here's a group that has unlimited funding. They can do anything they want to do, go anywhere they want to go, have a field primate biologist on pay with them at all times. Nobody can compete with that. So anyway, tonight's main subject, we're going to talk about the lost city of the Grand Canyon. So this is an interesting line of evidence. The chain of custody for this whole thing begins with a 1907 article from the Phoenix Gazette. Right, and you have to kind of keep the year in mind because 1907 was a period of time when that was still kind of like the Old West, and there weren't many like established newspapers, but one of them in the West was the Phoenix Gazette, right? And the Colorado River runs down that way, and they ran a front page news article, and it's still out there online. If you type in Phoenix Gazette, Lost City, Grand Canyon, 1907 into any search engine, I'm sure it'll pull up. Chrome, if you're using Google, Google's a CIA based company, and those search results are greatly affected by the intelligence communities. So sometimes it's wiser to use a different kind of browser search engine. Use a Tor browser to look it up if you want to on the deep web, the black web. But this article is so interesting because, it's extensive. It's detailed. In fact, the article is so detailed and has so much information in it that you're extremely hard-pressed to believe that this was simply yellow journalism, as they call it, an effort by newspaper journalists in the past to invent stories in order to sell more newspapers. That's really what it came down to. And they've had examples of that occurring in the Old West from time to time. However, none of them have this kind of extensive detail involved with it. So that's what's really interesting to me. It talks about how this gentleman came down the river to the Phoenix area, and he had a boatload of artifacts with him. And he presented identification to show that he was in fact employed by the Smithsonian. This boatload of artifacts is described in the newspaper article as being like gold, silver, jeweled type of artifacts, and that they appeared to be Egyptian looking. Not to say they were Egyptian, but they looked to them like the people who looked at the artifacts like it must have come from ancient Egypt, that kind of a thing. You know, back then there wasn't a hugely educated population, especially people that were exposed like we are today with tons of artifacts and documentaries and things like that about ancient Egypt. So this was, you know, to them in the Old West, 1907, turn of the century, they saw these artifacts and they said, it kind of looks like Egypt, you know, like we've seen in pictures and that kind of thing. So that's how they described them in the article. The gentleman prepared all of these artifacts into shipping boxes, and they were shipped back to the Smithsonian. They have since, of course, disappeared. The Smithsonian in paranormal circles is renowned for the fact that they covered up non-stop amounts of historical evidence in the past. Anything that would upset the Judeo-Christian biblical ideas of society at that time were sort of suppressed or outright destroyed. There's some new articles out there where somebody at the Smithsonian has come across evidence that they did in fact destroy many thousands of giant bones that were uncovered across North America. And they did that because they thought that it was going to really cast a bad view on Western expansion. The idea was, well, they believed in what's called manifest destiny, plays into all of this in a huge way. For those of you who are college or university history students, you will know what manifest destiny is. It's taught in every single university history of about North America. It's the idea that, white settlers were fulfilling the will of God as they conquered this land and spread westward, right? So any kind of evidence that they came across to suggest that somebody had been here before the white settlers and the Native American populations, that was a no-go. That had to be suppressed because it would undermine the argument that they were making that they were justified in their westward expansion and in the treatment of the indigenous people. It all plays together. So when they came across this lost city in the Grand Canyon, here is ultimate evidence that not only was somebody there way before white settlers came there, but they were an extremely advanced culture, and they built a vast city into the cliffside, the actual rock of the Grand Canyon. This explorer, his name is S.A. Jordan, who came down the river, noticed the opening up on a rock cliff, It looked to him like a carved doorway. He also noticed a series of steps going from the side of the river up the cliffside to the doorway. He pulled his boat over. He was able to get out, make his way up these steps to the doorway. And when he entered into what he described as a vast, cavernous-like city that had various, like, gigantic spokes that were hallways that led off in various directions, almost like a spoked wheel. And he described artifacts. One of them was like a Buddha-looking like figure, but it wasn't Buddha. One of them was it was holding something like a lotus flower, but it looked slightly different. It was very odd. Some of the artifacts looked completely Egyptian. And he said that this city was vast enough that it could house 50,000 people. And we'll see how pertinent that is to this entire mystery, right? So this is a vast city built literally into the rock. So it's an underground city, right? You can't really see the city from the river. You have to walk through the doorway into this gigantic structure, and then the city is there before you, right? So he gathers up as many artifacts as his boat will hold. And again, this man was a known explorer of his day that the Smithsonian had hired to explore the Grand Canyon. So that's how all of this math adds up. He gets the boatload of artifacts. He goes down the river to the Phoenix Gazette. They're there when he shows up. It makes a big scene because he shows up with a boatload of this, amazing stuff. They write an article about it that gets published, and it's something that they couldn't erase from public record. Eventually, the article makes it out. It shows up online. It gets leaked, and here you have direct physical evidence of them covering up what might be the greatest archaeological find of all time. Now, who built the city? Well, there are some very interesting indications that whoever it was connected to ancient Egypt. And the reason why we believe that to be the case is not only are some of the artifacts Egyptian looking and were described that way, but when you examine on maps the area where the article describes the city being, all of that area is declared completely off limits, even to park personnel. I'll say that again. There are parts of the Grand Canyon which are strictly forbidden for any human to enter into, including park personnel. That's a fact. Fact number 2, these areas all around the city that are all encompassed in these no-go zones have Egyptian names. And when you plot out each one of the peaks in this area that all have Egyptian names, they match perfectly the layout that you have at Giza. You have a display of Orion's belt with Sirius off center down at its feet. And the entire thing, which you can Google all of this if you must Google or whatever, do a search engine search, but you'll see that there is a existing map now of the Grand Canyon, which draws all of the lines between these Egyptian names and peaks and everything together. And shows you how perfect it is. It's almost a mirror image on the ground, right? Point 2, we have testimony from a couple of hikers who willfully disregarded the no trespass rule. They wandered off into this no-go zone and attempted to climb one of these peaks, and they claim that they found a secondary entrance into the same city. Point 3. It's interesting, very, very interesting, because you always have a group of people out there that say, oh, it just couldn't be. There was no transatlantic contact between, North America and ancient Egypt before Columbus. There's no way. Well, we have some interesting evidence to kind of suggest otherwise. And one of the major pieces of evidence that is little known out there is a documentary that was produced by a university in Europe. Today you can find the documentary online. It is a bit obscure, but I highly recommend it. And it's called The Curse of the Cocaine Mummies. Great name for a documentary, right? Well, this university professor in Europe is a world-renowned toxicologist. And she decided to run an experiment to do toxicology testing on all of the mummies that were ever taken out of Egypt. She wanted to see what they had been ingesting, because if you were mummified, you were sort of the upper echelon of that society. So it'd be very interesting to see what the upper echelon were ingesting. And that would show up, if they were ingesting any sort of drugs and things like that, it would show up in their toxicology. And so that's what she did. She went around to every single museum and university all through Europe that had a mummy that came out of Egypt, and she did a toxicology test on them. And 100% of them tested positive for both nicotine and cocaine. 2 plants that only grow in the Americas. Only 2. Tobacco does not grow in ancient Egypt or anywhere near it. And coca leaves only grow in South America. So we have indisputable, undeniable proof that there was trade taking place between the Egyptian hierarchy and indigenous people in the Americas. Had to be the case. That's interesting. Then when you take into effect the pharaohship of Akhenaten, and for those of you who don't recall Akhenaten, he's the one depicted with the elongated skull. I studied art history at the Metro State University in Denver, and I'll never forget that they talked about Akhenaten and how he's the one pharaoh not depicted as being perfect of stature. All the other pharaohs are all muscular and buff and they look tough and there's all this kind of stuff. Not Akhenaten. Akhenaten's got the weird elongated skull. He's got the sort of weird ET-shaped body and the big pot belly, right? And he and Nefertiti, who's his wife, who also is depicted with an elongated skull, is holding 2 of their babies, and their babies have elongated skulls. And Akhenaten attempts to change the religion of all of ancient Egypt from a polymorphous, or they had many, many hundreds of different gods, basically. And he wanted that to all go away so that they could worship the one true sun disk god, which he referred to as the Aten, which was the sun, basically. He wanted it all to be kind of reversed into sun disk worship, and this led to his downfall. The priest had plotted his assassination and even plotted the assassination of his children, etc. What's interesting is that it's rumored that one of his offspring, after his assassination, actually disappeared from ancient Egypt with 50,000 followers. And where might have he gone? Well, might he have gone to a land that they had pre-existing trade routes with? A land that held 2 sacred plants that were being ingested by the upper echelon of ancient Egypt. A land that had tobacco and cocaine. And when they got here, is it possible that he and his 50,000 followers actually made it to the desert Southwest, to the Grand Canyon, a place to them resembled their homeland? And is it possible that they actually dug out a vast city into the actual cliff sides of the Grand Canyon and began their culture once again in exile? It's an interesting possibility, for sure. And what's even more interesting is that my old protege, or I was the protege of my cryptozoology teacher, J.C. Johnson, who got invited on an expedition to the Grand Canyon by David Hatcher Childress of Ancient Aliens, and they were looking for the city. And they had drones, and they had some guys that were going to attempt to rappel down the side of the cliffs to the city entrance, right? The cliffs proved to be far too steep. You're talking about thousands of feet. The drones had trouble with sheer wind that was coming through. But the interesting thing about it was that while they were attempting all of this, an unmarked and they filmed it when it came by, but an unmarked white airplane came by and started flying right through the canyon where they were doing this operation. And there's only one group of people that fly unmarked white airplanes in North America and can get away with it, and that's the CIA. Look it up. So that is fascinating stuff. I was going to get to the lost colony on Mars too. That must be a time for its own show. It is interesting though, because I'll probably cover that next week for you guys. I don't want to disappoint you, but it's an interesting line of evidence, and it involves the great-granddaughter of Dwight D. Eisenhower. So there's a line of evidence that traces all the way back to the 1960s, late 1950s, a group of Illuminati that went under the guise of the Club of Rome. You can look that up. That can be your homework this week before next week's show. And the Club of Rome determined that the Earth was going to face overpopulation within the next few decades, and their calculations have been correct. We're at 8 billion and counting. Pretty soon we'll be at 10 billion, and then we're off to the races. Exponential growth, 20 billion, 30. How many can we take? How far does it go? Not even a pandemic could slow it down, fake or not. So they were right in their calculation about that, but they decided to come up with a series of alternatives to staving off overpopulation. One was just population control through controlled warfare. That proved pretty effective until the invention of the nuclear weapon, the proliferation, I should say, of nuclear weapons, and then it made it an untenable scenario, because sooner or later somebody pushes that button, and they didn't want to kill the planet. They were trying to save humanity. So they discounted that idea. Number two, founding a world religion so that you could control the breeding habits of those people involved with with religious beliefs. Most breeding habits are controlled by religious beliefs. And alternative 3 was off-planet colonization, and that's what they chose. And we'll be talking about that this next week, because that actually ties into a lot of what's happening right now with the Space Force, with coming UAP disclosure. The Space Force and Trump administration feature prominently into all of this, because they had to know, or have to know, that colony is there or was there. We have indications from some really interesting sources that the colony was in sort of a desperate situation, needing parts and things like that. So we'll hit that next week, guys. And again, thanks for joining me on Paranormal Intelligence Agency Radio. Next week, we'll jump down another one of these deep, dark rabbit holes, including the Mars colony. Stay tuned for the Vixen's Vault and the fantastic Nancy Planeta. I'll see you next week.